Today we have Steve Wright of Nex-Tech and Justin McClung of Nex-Tech. They're on the line to discuss the ever-changing world of technology and how it can affect your business. I want to remind everybody that you can always ask any question of us in your questions pane on the GoToWebinar pane, and we will answer all of those at the end of the presentation. With that, I'll leave Steve and Justin on the line.
All right, good morning, everybody. And today we have remotely joining us Justin McClung. He is currently in the greatest NFL location on the planet. That'd be San Francisco. So welcome, Justin. And do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, first off, it is not the greatest NFL city. That would be Dallas, Texas, the greatest NFL city, especially this year. But no, I am the Internet Manager for Nex-Tech. I've been there for over 20 years. I am wildly passionate about technology and new services coming on the horizon, and I'm always on the bleeding edge, or try to be on the bleeding edge of technology as much as possible. So I'm just here to help answer any questions I can.
All right. Well, thank you, Justin. And, you know, I made a list of things that I thought you and I could cover today. And, you know, you being the, you know, the connection to the Internet for us and kind of being the one that's pretty much in the know. I've seen in the news a lot about this net neutrality, and, you know, I've heard a lot of pros and cons about this whole thing, but can you kind of define it for us, what it means, and then take us through kind of some of the impacts that that might have on the people listening to this call today?
Sure, and I'll just give you the actual definition. Net neutrality is the principle that Internet service providers and governments should treat all data on the Internet equally, not discriminating or charging differentially by user, content, site, platform, application, type of attached equipment, or mode of communication. So that's the actual definition. Essentially what it says is that the Internet itself is open. No one can create, you know, slow lanes, fast lanes, and those are kind of the terms that are being thrown around right now in the FCC. So the idea is that you cannot pick and choose what application or what service you want to allow on your network as an ISP, or you cannot choose who you're going to speed up or slow down on going through your ISP connections. So, you know, my stance on it is it's none of the ISP's business what you do with your Internet connection. If you need more bandwidth for whatever service it is you're using, then you certainly can buy more bandwidth, which is good for you and good for the ISP. In this case, it would be us. And at this point, we don't have any plans to take part in any fast lanes, so to speak. But we do hope that the FCC does shoot down the current plan that's going through right now. The public comment portion of that process closed on September 15th, and it was by far the had the highest number of public comments of any other topic that the FCC has ever heard. So it's a very passionate thing for users out there.
And so if I was maybe an end user, what this might look like to me is if there was not the neutrality, meaning there was these kind of fast lanes, slow lanes, maybe an example would be that YouTube, for example, could be preferred for whatever reason, and so it would be really fast, meaning my videos would load really fast and be a good user experience. But then for whatever reason, I would choose to say that Hulu, I didn't want them to run Hulu, so I made it really slow, so it took a lot of time to buffer and made that end user experience pretty poor. Is that kind of what that might look like?
Yeah, exactly. And I'll give you a perfect example of the Comcast-Netflix relationship. Comcast was, even though they don't admit to it, they were slowing down Netflix traffic on their network until they could get a paid peering agreement with Netflix. This, of course, was bad for Netflix themselves because to the end user, they didn't know why their Netflix stream was poor, why it was always buffering or was not high def. They just knew that Netflix wasn't good. On the backside, Comcast said, well, because you take so much bandwidth, we need you to pay us for our network. In the end, Netflix blinked first, and they paid for a peering agreement with Comcast, and lo and behold, shortly after the agreement was done, the quality of Netflix across the Comcast network went back to where it should have been. So that's a perfect example of why net neutrality is important to the end user, is because they don't have control over the services or applications that they want to use, and they're already paying for it. They're already paying the ISP for service, and they're already paying Netflix for that portion of the service. So it should be a consistent experience. And where it gets really iffy is when, say, every ISP plays the game and starts to massage data, so to speak. You could always say, well, you could go to the ISP next door and get service and get Netflix better quality. Well, what happens when everybody does the same thing? That's really when it becomes a problem, is because some businesses could never have been started if net neutrality wasn't there to begin with, because small companies cannot afford, startups cannot afford to pay for priority lanes or fast lanes for the services that they're providing when they're getting created. So it's, you can definitely look at it from both sides of the spectrum. I tend to look at it more from the user side, personally, because I'm very passionate about an open internet, and I don't think anybody should be regulating what I do on the internet. So therefore, I feel the same way about our users. I don't feel that it's our responsibility to decide what they do on our internet connection.
So you've talked about kind of the national scene and what that looks like, but really that could end up affecting, small or local businesses in our area, because it could give the ability, and I'm not saying it would, but it could give the ability of that ISP to almost make choices of who they support on the internet. They could control, if there was two businesses in the community and they both had websites, they could almost make one unusable. Is that kind of what could happen?
That's absolutely what could happen. Once the rules go away, then all kinds of anti-competitive things can come into the mix. And because most people don't have visibility into the ISP's network, trying to prove certain shenanigans, so to speak, that are going on is very difficult. Just like in the Netflix-Comcast debate, Comcast flat out said, we're not doing anything with your data, when Netflix could prove it. They had the tools to prove that they were, but nobody wanted to listen. So it's very dangerous. And the way I look at it is, if you're a small company in rural Kansas or in our territory, it could be your website that is affected, a very popular website that you run, or it could be a service that you use to run your business that is not paying for priority access. So therefore, it hurts your business. And there's not a whole lot you're going to be able to do about that other than look for an ISP that doesn't do that. But again, once it starts, and once the providers start to make extra money paying for their networks based on fast lanes, you can't really hold an ISP in a negative light if they don't do the same thing that every other ISP is doing. Once the rules change, the rules change. So it opens the door for all kinds of different ways to think about the internet. And personally, I hope it doesn't get there.
Got it. All right, let's change subjects to something a little less politically charged. You could say in at least one sense, anyway. So I know you're a big proponent of Google and some of the Google products. Can you tell us just a short list of some of the Google products that you use today?
Sure. I use for a lot of personal stuff. I use the full suite of Google for my Gmail, my contacts. Probably that may be the most important thing, actually, is my contacts. I use my Gmail contacts application to sync across all of my devices, so that if I ever have a phone that dies or a laptop that dies or anything like that, I don't have to worry about backing up or exporting or importing or anything like that. I just reconnect my Gmail account, all my contacts sync back up with any device that I have. So that's the reason why I chose to use Gmail contacts for that. But I use on different machines, if I don't have Microsoft Office licensing, I use the Google Docs for a Word alternative or Excel alternative for sure. I use Google Drive. I have a ton of space on Google Drive, so I back up all my digital pictures and home movies, whatever application or whatever files that I have on any of my devices, all get sunk to Google Drive, so that I don't have to have a terabyte hard drive as my only source of backup. So I back it up locally at home to an external hard drive, but then I also back it up into the cloud. So, as they say, if you have one backup, you don't have any. So I have 2 backups at least of pretty much everything to make sure I don't lose it. But those are the primary Google applications. I use an iPhone, so I'm not an Android user anymore. I used to be, but I'm more of an iPhone guy these days.
All right. And so are you paying for any of that space? I know that Google has some pay services, some not, and I'm not sure where that line is. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, for my Google Drive, I actually, like I say, I have a full terabyte of storage. So I believe it's $9.99 a month. I can't say that for sure because I pay a year up front, but it's in the big picture, it's really pretty cheap for cloud-based storage, and you can do that with Microsoft or Dropbox. I used to use Dropbox pretty heavily, but I kind of liked how Google integrated with everything else, so I switched over to them. But I actually pondered switching back to Dropbox here the other day because their prices went down again. So it's just basically the same thing, just a different way of doing it in some cases. I also use Google Voice. I just remembered that one that I used to use more heavily, but the one killer feature that they have that I used a lot of was voicemail translation to text. So I get a voicemail, it automatically sends me a text message and an email that translated it into text. So technically I didn't check voicemail for a few years when I actually did that. I just got an email or a text and dealt with it that way. But I recently switched away from that and went back to traditional voicemail just because it took too many rings sometimes for people that would call me. It'd ring my cell phone. It would ring a few times, and it would forward to Google Voice, and it would ring a few times, and then I'd leave a voicemail. So it was more of a hassle for end users, so I kind of went away from it. But I do still use it for uses where I want to give somebody a direct number, but I don't want them to have my cell phone number, so kind of a throwaway number, so to speak. So I do use that for certain vendors or friends, I guess, depending on what your definition is.
Okay. So some of the things, I know of a couple more. I believe they're Google services that I think that you're using that people may be less familiar with. You use a project management system that I believe is Google-based, is it not?
No, we're using Basecamp for the project management.
Oh, okay. And that's not a Google product?
No, that's its own company. But it is a very cool tool.
Okay, so can you tell us about Basecamp then?
Sure. I mean, it's a web-based project management tool that we use. We started using it in our department initially to track different projects and tasks, that kind of thing, very basic. And it eventually grew into a tool that quite a bit of the company uses now. And the beauty is it's such a low-cost option, and it works on every device you can imagine, that it was an easy decision to start using it for us. I mean, you could always go with a Microsoft project, but something like that, but it is it's expensive, but it also is very hard to use. You have to have a dedicated project manager that truly knows the system just to keep it, running the way it should be running. And with something like Basecamp, anybody that knows how to point and click can use it. It's a really pretty cool project, pretty cool tool, and it's very inexpensive when you really think about the alternatives.
Gotcha. And then is Honey, I believe it's related, or is it a little separate?
It's still separate as well. It's like we use that for our internal blogging platform, I guess, as an internal blog for employees to keep up on different. We started that one because we wanted to work on cultural things within the company and have open communication. So the idea is anybody can post any story, and anybody in the company can comment on those stories and it's completely open. You don't have to worry that you're talking to the CEO or, you feel uncomfortable about it. We're changing, or we went through this big process of trying to make our culture better. It's always been good, but it can never be too good. So we wanted to introduce tools that help us open communication, because that's so difficult when you've got so many employees spread across such a large area using a lot of different devices. Communicating is very difficult. We, internally it's a joke. We're a communications company, and we find it hard to communicate. That's just the reality of it, and that's probably the reality of any company that has more than a couple of people, honestly.
Gotcha. All right, so let's contrast this. You're a big Google user. What are you using Microsoft for today, or are you?
I do use it from a work perspective for all word processing and or spreadsheets. At the end of the day, Google Docs can only do so much. If you need to do really heavy lifting with word processing or spreadsheets, you really need to focus on the traditional Microsoft Office application. Word is just a better word processor, and Excel is by far the best spreadsheet application that you can get. No one's going to touch that one for, as long as spreadsheets, in my opinion, as long as spreadsheets are needed. It's a very good application. So I do use those. I'm a Mac user, so I use Keynote rather than PowerPoint. But if you're a PC user, PowerPoint's still the gold standard for presentation software. So those are the primaries. I use Outlook every now and again. We are an Exchange company, but I still, again, I use a Mac, and I use different mail clients. But every now and again, you still have to open up Outlook to do certain tasks within Exchange.
All right, so I'm completely confused now. So you use a iPhone for your phone, you use a Mac on your desktop, you use Google for a lot of your stuff, and then you have Microsoft layered on top. So how are you just choosing what you think is probably best of breed at the time? How are you, or do you want to be, you're kind of the internet guy, so is your purpose to try everything and see what's out there? What is your thought behind all that?
I'm like what is the dog in Up, squirrel. I try to focus on whatever's out at the time, and if I play with it for a little while, and if it does what I need it to do without losing too much of what I had with maybe another application, then I'll switch. I have no problem changing my entire work process or home process or whatever the case is based on a new tool or new technology. I like playing with it and figuring out what's good and what's bad. Which is why I don't use, iCloud from Apple, even though it's gotten a lot better. I don't like it. I don't like how it works. I don't trust it right now. Not from a security aspect. I just don't trust that it's going to do what it needs to do. So, which is why I still use, Google applications for my contacts and calendars and things like that. So, essentially, I would say I'm best of breed, because once I've vetted all of the tools that I play with, I'll settle on something and use it semi-permanently until there's that other new one that comes out that I need to play with. So I have no loyalty to a specific technology or application just blindly. I'll say that. If Android ever came out with a cool piece of hardware, I'd switch to Android when it was time to upgrade phones. But at the end of the day, Apple still just destroys, in my opinion, destroys any Android hardware there is, because essentially the software is software. They're all going to do basically the same thing. I want a very cool piece of hardware that I'm going to use as one of the devices that's in my hand or around me 24 hours a day.
Understood. All right, so you talked a little bit about Google Voice, and you kind of talked about some of the limitations that drove you kind of away from it, mainly being the number of rings that it got to you. But, you talked also about the benefits being the voicemail, the text messaging. Is there anything else that we should know, both positive or negative, that would, if I was looking at maybe using that service, that I should be paying attention to?
Yeah, from a positive standpoint, as of right now, it's still free. Eventually, I think they're going to have to go away from that model, and as they integrate it more with Google Hangouts, And that is another Google service that I use, Google Hangouts, which is awesome. But the more they integrate Google Voice and Google Hangouts, I would expect at some point they're going to start charging for Google Voice, or the voice side of Google Hangouts, I would say. You never know that with Google. Sometimes Google just does it because they can. I'd say the big negative outside of the multiple rings is the quality. It still is more of a walkie-talkie type conversation, where I talk, you listen, you talk, I listen, that kind of thing. And if you try to talk over each other, it's just going to drown it out. You know, the conversation will be very difficult. It's not as good a quality as a traditional landline for sure, and it's not as good as a cellular connection either. But again, for the cost, that's why people use tools like that, because if there's definitely value in losing a little bit of quality. No different than people 20 years ago hated cell phones because the quality wasn't there. Well, everybody got used to the quality. Quality's gotten better, obviously, but it still isn't as good as a traditional landline connection. But people, they forget those things, and they just kind of start to deal with the issues, and it becomes acceptable. So voice over the internet is that way as well. Once you use it enough, you just realize that it's not going to be 100% great, but it's acceptable.
All right. So you mentioned Google Hangouts. Tell us what that is.
It's a video conferencing solution that Google has. It's fantastic. If you've never used it, you should. Think of it like FaceTime on an iPhone, only with up to, I believe, 10 people at a time, and that's free. I think you could pay for a version that has many more than that, but you see them obviously with their webcam or their front-facing camera on their phone, and everybody can talk and have the conversation, and you can share screens. Anybody can share screens and annotate and do whatever it is you need to do, and it's completely free. And I know there's a ton. Skype's been out forever. There's tons of tools like that. Thing I like about Google is it's super easy to use, doesn't cost you anything, and it works on pretty much any device there is. So we use it internally to have video conferences with small groups of people. We have a traditional teleconferencing system or video conferencing system in many of our conference rooms within the company, but in my office we don't have one, so we use a lot of Google Hangouts.
Now, in my opinion, the traditional video conferencing, if you're going to have a conference room or large groups of people, to maybe even one or other large groups of people, the quality seems to be much more clear on those solutions. But if you're just doing one-to-one, or where you have a bunch of individuals coming together, is that where the Google Hangouts kind of shines? Is that your opinion, or do you think it really looks both sides?
Absolutely. It isn't a solution for a big conference room as it is today. I know Google's coming out with a device that does basically that. It turns your big TV and your one camera into a big video conferencing system for an office. But the way I use it is it's one-to-one or one-to-many, I guess, individually, but not a big group, simply because the voice cancellation or noise cancellation on microphones and all kinds of things that really good, solid video conferencing solutions have built in, you're doing it from a laptop versus a dedicated system that's what they do. So it is definitely comparing apples to oranges. You wouldn't replace a office-based system with a Google Hangout or a Skype the way it is today.
Gotcha. All right, so moving on, I know that you're a huge fan of email spam, and you love to take spam and delete it every day. So, I hear from customers every day kind of one of two different stories. One is I'm getting too much spam and I don't like it, and why do I keep getting spam? And then the second side is like the other side of it, where people that I am expecting messages to get, from aren't coming through. They're getting caught in my spam filter. What the heck's going on here? And I mean, I know kind of from under the hood that spam filtering is painful. It's very difficult to I guess, tweak those settings so that you maximize both sides of that conversation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, generically, spammers are very good at what they do. Before we went through our upgrade a few months ago, we were blocking up to 90, I believe it was over 90% of messages coming into our system. So just think about that. I mean, let's just say 95 messages out of 100 never even got to a user's inbox because we saw it, tagged it, threw it away, just rejected it completely, whatever the case is. There's tons of methods in the process to get it done. It's incredible how much spam is out there today that users don't even see. So it's a delicate balance between blocking it and having false positives where you block a legitimate message because your spam filters got too aggressive. And it happens every day with every email provider everywhere. It's just the way it is. For the most part, the big guys use a lot of the same tools, a lot of the same blacklists, the same tactics, that kind of thing to accomplish what it is they're trying to accomplish. And they share that data so that if one company finds that they're getting attacked via this very specific message or subject or technology or whatever the case is, their systems can use the things they learn to then block it on other networks and systems. It is a very, very difficult task. It takes a lot of man hours. It takes very smart people to understand all the tools involved. And it's not like you can just, especially as an ISP. I mean, as a business, it's one thing when you're dealing with one domain and a couple hundred users. There's definitely appliances you can buy or services you can subscribe to that do all the legwork for you. But as an ISP, you have to build all those tools and you have to manage all those tools to make sure that you're providing the best possible email service you can for your customers. And it's difficult. It's a hard proposition, and it never ends. It's an ongoing thing. As soon as you figure out one method that they're using, they're already 2 steps ahead of you with something else. So it's a never-ending process, and it's all about getting you to click on something so that they can make money or steal personal data or whatever their reason for sending the spam is. It's about money at the end of the day. So we work very hard to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure that our users do not see it unless it just slips through.
And kind of on that same thing, I was always told that they wouldn't be doing it if they weren't making money. So, even the small fraction of email that gets through, and even smaller fraction of that somebody clicks on and buys something, or they capture information, or whatever it is, it must be pretty low cost to send this out with high return from the standpoint that, if I send out 100,000 or a million or 100 million messages and only 1% gets through, it still might be worth my time. Is that kind of the story?
That's exactly the story. And you're not talking 100 million, you're talking billions every single day, 24 hours a day, 365. It's never ending, and they're very good at what they do. And they are, in most cases, foreign entities, Russia, China, India, that kind of thing. And they're not the typical Nigerian prince thing. They've gotten very good to make it look like it's a legitimate email from Facebook or Twitter or a service that you would actually use. So they're very good at what they do.
Gotcha. Okay, so building your digital brand. I know that you're relatively passionate about this. Define what your digital brand means. Give us a context on this.
Well, your digital brand is no different than your regular brand. Traditionally you built your brand through advertising and public relations and those kind of mechanisms in the physical world. Well, today, obviously, everything's going digital. Everything's on the web, and for most businesses, the vast majority of businesses, you do need a digital brand. Even if you're worried or you're nervous, you don't really know what to do, you need to dig into it, and you need to start to look at what you're going to do for your digital brand, because the kids today, and I'm not a kid, but kids today do not watch television. They do not read newspapers. They could care less. Actually, they think snail mail is cool, but it's not going to sell them anything. So if you don't figure out how to get your brand in front of the future customer, you better hope your competitor doesn't either, because it's going to be a different world. It already is, but it's going to get even worse as the tweens that are growing up today start to actually buy services for themselves. So I highly, highly, highly recommend you do the bare minimums. Get a website, even if it's just a very basic website. You got to be out there. Have a Facebook and a Twitter profile at the very least, and depending on your company and whatever the product is you're selling, you may need to look at things like Pinterest or Snapchat or YouTube if you're very visual and video based in some cases where you're doing help videos or anything like that. Get a YouTube channel and start putting content out there. It's really about putting your value out there to be found and engaging with your current customers as well as potential customers to show them that you really want their service. So there's tons of tools available. There's tons of services available, and you got to figure out what your niche is and how to use those tools. And don't be afraid. I think a lot of people today are worried that they're going to say the wrong thing on the internet or not understand it. My recommendation is to be as open and honest with your customers as possible, and don't get caught in the back and forth with trolls on the internet, because you're going to lose that game. So you got to be careful with that too. Just because you get a bad review or a bad rating or somebody says something nasty about your business, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good to get into a public back and forth with them via a social media application or site. If you build a good enough brand that your users really love and care about your products, the other users will help to take care of the trolls so that you don't have to. It doesn't do you any good to get into the mud with those guys, because all they're trying to do is they're trying to get your hair raised and get you upset publicly, and that's not going to do you any good at all.
On kind of that same note, would you agree that if you're not purposely building your digital brand as a company or a product or whatever it is, then most likely that brand is being built on other sites, just you're not drawing your own attention to it, meaning that people are able to post reviews on different applications and different things, and that's the only information that may be available about your business or product if you're not purposely building it. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. You need to control your brand. Otherwise, you said it perfectly. If you don't control it, somebody else will. Whether you know it or have ever paid attention to it, people are talking about you online in some way. You may not know it because you don't know where to look, or in some cases you may not want to look. But it's not going to do you any good to stick your head in the sand. You need to engage with users and have that conversation and figure out, if you're getting negative reviews or people are talking negatively about you, don't look at that as a negative thing. Look at that as a positive thing. That means you have something you can work on to make your product better, or you need to be open and honest with users to communicate why it is the situation is the way it is as best you can. Obviously, there's trade secrets and things that you just can't say, but I highly recommend you try to be as open and honest with the customers as possible, and they will trust you more. Therefore, they will become your PR team and attack the trolls or post good comments about your company, therefore bringing more business into your door. So I recommend you dig in, start to learn the tools if you haven't already, and just figure it out. At the end of the day, digital branding is all about time. You have to dedicate the time to go search for what people are saying, and then figure out how you're going to communicate with them on a consistent basis. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to start the process, and then somebody asks a question or posts a comment, and you don't react for 3 weeks. That's not, in today's world, that's not acceptable. It's no different than if somebody left you a voicemail at work and you didn't call them back for 3 weeks. That's where the whole thing is going. It's all digital. It's all online. So you need to be where your customers are at and have those conversations where they're at. Now, you're not going to decide where you have those conversations anymore. They are. So I recommend you jump in with both feet and start playing the game. And it's actually very enjoyable to engage with your customers. I have a lot of fun engaging with our customers online.
You know, I was just thinking maybe we could pick a common ground here athletically of a company that's really building a digital brand right now through some viral marketing and different things. Is, you know, the World Series is obviously going on with the KC Royals, and I'm completely amazed at some of the viral things that are happening with that team. You know, I just saw this morning one of the players, as a tip, left a ticket to the World Series for their waiter to join his family for the game. I mean, that's the kind of, you know, obviously things that are going to catch a lot of attention. I think we've all seen the story where, you know, the Royals were playing baseball with kids in the stands at another stadium and things like that. You know, that kind of stuff is what, priceless, would you say, for that market?
Oh, no question. No question. I mean, how do you plan that, and how do you capture that? You don't. You just sit back and you watch your users or your fans, in that case, take care of you. Yeah, you cannot pay for that kind of PR. And it's a, you know, in most cases, it's a feel-good story. Everybody wants to share it. So figure out as a business, you know, how do I help shape those conversations about me or my company? And it's not easy. Having something go viral is, you know, you cannot, I don't care how many experts you talk to, you cannot create a viral marketing plan. It happens. You do your best to create something that people are going to enjoy or learn from, but the viral part just happens. It's dumb luck, but when it does, it's huge for your business. So, yeah, treat your customers right, be where they're at, and hopefully those kind of things happen to you.
Okay, so what's your favorite tech gadget? Favorite?
I had to think about this. I have 3. Two are pretty obvious. My iPhone 6, phenomenal. I love it. I waited. You know, I had the 5. I didn't go to the 5S. I had the 5. I waited for the 6. It's a great phone. Probably the next one is my Xbox One. I play a lot of Madden. I'm a big NFL guy, so I play a lot of Madden. I play some Call of Duty with my kids. But the one I can't wait for, I don't have yet, but I'm a big Kickstarter guy. So I fund a lot of Kickstarter projects because I give cool technology that otherwise wouldn't exist in a lot of cases. There's one called ShotStats, which is basically a little, I'm a tennis player, so it's a dampener you put on your tennis racket, but it's a smart dampener, so it can tell you all kinds of statistics about your tennis swing, whether or not you're doing a forehand, a backhand, a serve, topspin, slice, any statistic you can imagine, and it'll record it, so then you obviously, you know, sync it with your phone, and then you can review your tennis match to see, am I getting better, is my serve getting faster, you know, is my topspin getting stronger, whatever it is you're trying to measure. So that, I ordered one of those. I actually ordered 3 because my kids both play tennis as well. So I'm looking forward to that in the first quarter of 2015 when that finally comes out to play with that. That'll be I'll totally geek out when that thing shows up.
So that makes you kind of a geek of the Internet of Things, and the Internet of Things in this particular case is, I don't know, I think we're seeing this flood of new sensors, per se, you know, the health monitors, the Fitbits, the Apple Watch is coming out, you know, that can measure all of these different data points, whether it be on your tennis swing, to your golf swing, to your heart rate, to, you know, do you see that kind of being the next frontier of your Internet connection where all of these things are now just going to create this mass of data, and that's kind of, do you think that's where the future of things are right now?
Yeah, deja vu. I'm sitting in San Francisco at a conference for the Internet of Things. It is by far, in my opinion, going to be the biggest thing since the Internet itself. Everything you own, whether it's clothes, refrigerator, it doesn't matter. Your car, everything you own is going to have sensors that are constantly recording something. And that something is going to go back into huge databases so that you can actually make context of what it is you're doing, where you're at, things you're buying, tools you're using, whatever it is. So much data is going to be available for users to then make their life better, make their business more efficient, make them safer, you name it. The sensors are getting so small and so cheap that now you can afford to have them, or it will be very soon, you'll be able to afford to have them on throwaway items. And once that day hits, the game completely changes. In the past, there's always been sensors, but the cost was so high, it was specific verticals or specific industries. Those days are changing very, very quickly. It's going to be data is going to be the next frontier, big data. You hear big data a lot as generic terms, I'm sure. It's going to be mind-boggling what data is available on you or your device. It's pretty incredible, actually. I mean, right now I'm wearing along with all my gadgets, I'm wearing a Misfit Shine, activity tracker on my wrist, and I've worn it for, I don't know, it was a Kickstarter project a couple years ago, and I've been wearing it ever since then. So I know how many steps I'm taking. And when I go play tennis, I know, statistics generically about my workout itself. But they're only getting better and recording even, more data all the time. It's like I say, it's pretty incredible, and that data is going to be worth something as well. It's going to be an asset to you or your organization. So monetizing that is going to bring all kinds of new ideas and new options for businesses and consumers as well. So it's going to be a completely different world in the next decade than it has been for sure.
All right, and before I turn this back over to Tricia for some questions here, what is it like watching a World Series game in San Francisco when you're from Kansas?
I would love to give you a really interesting answer, but the answer is I didn't watch it because I hate baseball. And I know that's probably that's not a very popular thing to say right now, but I'm all about football. I can tell you there's no way I'm going to tell anybody here that I'm from Kansas. I'm not that dumb. Of course, after last night's game, I probably could. Then they just laugh at me. But before that game last night, it probably wasn't a real safe idea for sure.
Gotcha. So Tricia, I'm going to take it back to you and see if you have any questions out there.
We do have a question out here, but I want to remind everybody that they can go ahead and enter more if they have one for us. As I tell you all that our next webinar will be on October the 28th, that's next Tuesday, and it's a fastest 16 minutes in technology webinar. We're going to be visiting with another person who here at Nex-Tech who went totally mobile with his whole department. He's over a lot of techs who are out in the field, and so he's going to tell you how he went totally mobile with everybody, and everybody is totally connected from their trucks. So with that coming up next week, and then the following month in November, we'll have another Tech Talk and Fastest 16 as well, and you can find all of those, that whole schedule, I should say, at nextech.com/free webinar, as well as our archived videos for this there on the right of that web page as well. The question that we do have, I think Steve may have a little bit of advice for this, but they're wondering if we have any type of social media etiquette rules for businesses.
Wow, I wish I had an answer for that. I hope Justin has a great answer for that.
Okay.
I would say we do. I mean, we have policies at Nex-Tech for social media interaction as an official from Nex-Tech, so to speak. But it's very, I can't tell you verbatim what it is, but generically it's certain people have the ability to speak on behalf of the company, that kind of generic idea. But it's a tricky answer because it depends on your business and it depends on your customer base. If you are, and I'll just go polar opposites, if you're extremely conservative company, then your social media profile and communication and everything about it needs to be in line with who you are. Because if your customer base is extremely conservative, you want to make sure you're not alienating them. So you need to be very careful about that. On the flip side, if you're very open and liberal and, if you're very, I don't know how to say it. If you're very open and you're not worried about making mistakes online, then it's a completely different conversation, and you can open it up to more people within your company to have those conversations with customers. But at the end of the day, to me, it comes down to common sense. If you wouldn't say something face-to-face with your customer, you probably shouldn't say it online. You should try to represent your company the best way you can online based on their morals and their priorities and, whatever it is the makeup of your company is. So with anything online, whether or not it's your teenage daughter online or your business, common sense should try to win out, put the emotion of a negative rating or negative comment as best you can behind you and say it the way you should say it from whatever perspective you're coming from. I guess that's kind of a long-winded way of saying common sense, common sense, common sense.
Great. That is all we have then for questions, and I want to thank both Justin for taking time out of his schedule there in San Francisco and Steve for being on the call with us.
Well, Tricia.
What's that?
I had one last question for Justin.
Oh, boy.
Just because we started this way, Justin, I know you're a Dallas Cowboys fan and they're having an amazing year, but can you tell me who their one loss this year came from?
Oh, no, it came from the San Francisco 49ers. Tony Romo threw 4 interceptions coming off of back surgery. They didn't know what they were going to be. So I actually give the 49ers a lot of credit for beating them down, because now they're going to come back and, I feel bad for you because we're not going to see it in the NFC Championship game. But at least you helped us get to where we're going. So I'll give the 49ers credit for that.
All right, Tricia, you can now end it. Thank you.
All right, we'll end this call then and see you all next time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.